A machine can betray you by breaking down, or it can save you if you listen carefully enough to hear what it's trying to become. In the spring of 1943, a Gato-class submarine operating west of the Marianas carried 79 men and one failing bearing. The bearing was located in the main reduction gear, starboard shaft, 47 feet aft of the control room. It had been logged for replacement in Pearl Harbor 3 patrols earlier, but replacements were scarce, and the sound it made, a rhythmic tick-click pause, 3 beats, silence, repeat, was judged tolerable. Fleet Submarine Operation Manual NAVAER 321B classified such defects as Category 2, monitor and record, repair when feasible. The bearing had been monitored, it had been recorded, it had not been repaired. At 1400 hours on the 16th of April, the submarine was running submerged at 160 feet, making 4 knots on electric drive when sonar detected high-speed screws bearing 090 range closing. 3 contacts, destroyers, Japanese. This isn't fiction. This is the sound of metal learning to lie. The stakes were immediate and geometric. A submerged submarine at patrol speed could not outrun a destroyer on the surface. Evasion required depth, silence, and distance. But depth brought pressure. Silence meant stopping. And distance took time the submarine did not have. Between those variables lived every man aboard, and the choice of which variable to sacrifice first belonged to the captain. But it was a 22-year-old sonar operator from Pennsylvania who would rewrite the equation entirely, using nothing but a wrench and the memory of a broken machine. It is 1620 hours. You are in the sound room, a compartment no larger than a closet, with green-painted bulkheads and a single folding seat. The air is warm and smells of oil and sweat. The JP sonar headset presses against your ears, foam cushions damp. The oscilloscope glows pale green, traceline jumping with each ping. You've been listening for 4 hours. Your hands rest on the bearing dial, fingers memorizing the rhythm of the ocean, the distant hum of biologics, the creak of the hull settling under pressure, and beneath it all, the tick-click pause of the starboard reduction gear. 3 beats. Silence. Repeat. You know this sound the way you know your own pulse. The captain's voice comes through the intercom, low and exact. Rig for silent running. Silent running is not silence. It is the elimination of every unnecessary sound, so that what remains can be measured and controlled. The procedure is outlined in Section 12 of the Fleet Submarine Manual and drilled until it becomes reflex. Ventilation fans are secured, pumps are stopped, the crew moves on stockinged feet. Conversations cease, even breathing becomes deliberate. What you are left with is the ocean outside, the steel around you, and the tick-click pause of the bearing 47 feet. Aft. Now the loudest sound on the boat. You twist the bearing dial and listen. The destroyers are running a search pattern. Their screws make a wet thrashing sound, higher pitched than American propellers. They are close enough that you hear the Doppler shift as they turn. You mark each contact. Destroyer 1 at 085. Destroyer 2 at 100, Destroyer 3 at 115. They are spreading out, triangulating. It is a standard Imperial Navy tactic recorded in translated tactical bulletins stored at the Naval War College, and it works because it tightens the net with every pass. The submarine drifts deeper. 180 feet. 200. The hull groans softly. You feel the pressure change in your ears. The captain orders a course change to 270 away from the destroyers, but at 4 knots, the maneuver is glacial. You listen to the screws grow louder. The oscilloscope trace spikes green each time a destroyer pings active sonar. They have not locked onto the submarine yet, but they are close. You estimate 6 minutes before the first depth charge pattern. It is in this moment, listening to the destroyers and the failing bearing, that you hear the similarity. The bearing ticks in triplets. Tick, click, pause. 3 beats, then silence. The interval is roughly 1.2 seconds per cycle. You have heard this rhythm for weeks, logged it in your notebook, complained about it to the motor machinist's mate who shrugged and said it would get worse before it got fixed. But now, through the sonar headset, you realize the bearing has a frequency and a pattern. It is irregular enough to mimic biological noise, the clicking of shrimp, the pulse of a whale, but mechanical enough to suggest machinery. And because it comes from inside the submarine, it radiates through the hull into the water as structure-borne sound. You think, if I can hear it, they can hear it. And then you think, if they can hear it, I can make them hear it wrong. The idea forms slowly, layer by layer. The bearing is aft. If you create a second source forward, louder and slightly offset in rhythm, you can generate a false acoustic signature. The destroyer's sonar operators will hear two sources and assume the submarine is in two places, or that the sound is ambient noise, or, if you are careful, that the submarine is moving in the direction of the false source. Deception through duplication. It is not in any manual. It is not doctrine. But the principle is sound. You reach for the intercom switch, hesitate, then press. Captain, sonar. Request permission to come to the control room. The captain's voice is flat. Denied. Maintain station. You press again. Sir, I have an idea about the destroyers. 3 seconds of silence. Then, come forward. Quietly. The control room is dim, lit only by the red lamps over the charts and the faint glow of the depth gauge. The captain stands beside the periscope well, arms folded. The executive officer is at the chart table. The diving officer watches the bubble in the inclinometer. No one speaks. You step inside and the captain looks at you without expression. You explain in a whisper. The bearing, the rhythm, the possibility of creating a false signature by replicating the sound forward near the bow, where it will radiate differently. You do not say it will work. You say it might confuse them long enough to break contact. The captain listens without interrupting. When you finish, he looks at the executive officer. The executive officer looks at the chart. The diving officer adjusts the trim without looking up. Finally, the captain says, "How would you make the sound?" You tell him, "A wrench, a pipe, the bulkhead near the forward torpedo room, controlled strikes in the same rhythm as the bearing, amplified by the hull. Simple, mechanical, repeatable." The captain considers this. He considers you. He considers the 3 destroyers above, their screws now loud enough to hear without sonar. He says, "You have 5 minutes to set it up. If it makes us louder, I will court-martial you myself." You nod and move forward. The forward torpedo room is a long, narrow space dominated by 4 tubes and the racks where reload torpedoes rest in their cradles. The air smells of grease and HBX explosive. 2 torpedomen sit on the deck motionless. You step past them to the starboard bulkhead, where a vertical run of freshwater piping climbs to the overhead. The pipe is 2 inches in diameter, steel, welded to mounting brackets every 3 feet. You pull a crescent wrench from your belt, 10 inches, standard Navy issue, and test the weight. You crouch and press your ear to the bulkhead. You can hear the bearing aft, muffled but present. Tick, click, pause. You count the interval, 1.2 seconds. You raise the wrench and strike the pipe lightly. The sound is sharp, metallic, wrong. You strike again, softer, aiming for the bracket instead of the pipe. Better. You adjust the angle and try a triplet. Tap, tap, pause. Close. You repeat it. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, tap, pause. The rhythm matches. One of the torpedomen leans toward you. What are you doing? You do not answer. You are listening. The sound you are making is radiating through the bulkhead, into the frames, into the pressure hull. It is louder than the bearing aft because it is forward, closer to the bow where the hull is thicker and the acoustic properties favor low-frequency transmission. Destroyer sonar, operating in the 3 to 5 kHz range, will pick it up as a distinct source. If they are listening carefully, they will hear 2 signatures, one aft, faint, and one forward, stronger. The forward signature will suggest the submarine is moving toward them or turning to engage. It will not be accurate, but it will be confusing. Confusion buys time. You return to the control room. The captain is listening on the overhead speaker, which carries the sound from your sonar station. The destroyers are pinging. The range is closing. You say, "Ready, sir?" The captain nods. "Execute." You return to the forward torpedo room, crouch by the bulkhead, and begin. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, tap, pause. You strike the bracket in rhythm, matching the bearing, counting silently. 1.2 seconds between cycles. Your wrist absorbs the impact. The wrench is cold. The torpedomen watch you but do not speak. You do not look at them. You are listening to the sound, adjusting the force, maintaining the interval. It must be consistent. Variation will reveal the deception. Through the bulkhead, faint but growing, you hear the destroyers. Their screws are loud now, thrashing close overhead. One passes directly above. The hull vibrates. You keep striking. Tap, tap, pause. The sound is deliberate, measured, false. You are lying with metal. In the control room, the captain listens. The executive officer plots the destroyer positions on the chart. The sonar operator, your relief, reports contact bearings every 30 seconds. The destroyers are adjusting their course. Destroyer 1 is turning to port. Destroyer 2 is slowing. Destroyer 3 is accelerating. The pattern is breaking. You strike the bracket, tap, tap, pause. The first depth charge detonates at 14 seconds. The explosion is distant, aft and high, at least 500 yards away. The hull shudders. Dust falls from the overhead. You keep striking. Tap, tap, pause. The second charge is closer, 300 yards, but still aft. They are following the false signature. They think the submarine is behind them, moving away, and they are chasing the sound forward where you are creating it. You strike the bracket, tap, tap, pause. The destroyers turn. You hear them through the hull, screws thrashing as they reverse course. They are hunting the ghost you have made. The real submarine, silent except for your deliberate tapping, drifts deeper and south, away from the noise, away from the net. The captain orders the helm to 220. Speed remains 4 knots. The distance opens. You strike for 6 minutes, then 8. Your wrist aches. The wrench is slick with sweat. The torpedomen are still watching. One of them starts to speak, but the other shakes his head. You do not stop. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, tap, pause. At 14 minutes, the captain's voice comes through the intercom. Secure. You stop. The silence is immediate and absolute. You lower the wrench and sit back against the bulkhead. Your hand is shaking. The torpedoman nearest you leans forward and whispers, "Did it work?" You do not know. The submarine drifts for 20 minutes in absolute silence. No propulsion, no ventilation, no sound, but the creak of the hull and the distant fading thrash of destroyer screws. The captain listens on the sonar speaker. The executive officer watches the chart. The crew waits. At 16:53 hours, the sonar operator reports contact, bearing 045, range opening, fading. The destroyers are moving away. They have lost the trail. The captain allows himself a single nod. He does not smile. He does not congratulate. He orders the submarine to continue south at minimum speed, still submerged until 1800 hours. Then he looks at you and says, "Return to your station." You return to the sound room. You sit in the folding chair and put the headset on. The ocean is quiet. The destroyers are gone. And beneath it all, still present, still steady, is the tick-click pause of the bearing 47 feet aft. 3 beats. Silence. Repeat. The after-action report filed by the submarine's captain on return to Midway describes the encounter in standard language. Contact with enemy destroyers, evasive maneuvers executed, depth charges avoided, no damage sustained. The report does not mention the bearing. It does not mention the wrench. It does not mention the sonar operator's name. These details were not classified, but they were not included. Procedure does not reward improvisation, even when improvisation works. The bearing was replaced in Pearl Harbor 2 weeks later. The submarine returned to patrol. The sonar operator remained at his station, according to the boat's deck log. Archived at the National Archives in College Park, he completed 4 more patrols before the war ended. He never spoke publicly about the incident. Neither did the captain, neither did the torpedomen who watched. What remains is the sound, not the destroyers, not the depth charges, but the rhythm of a failing bearing and the memory of metal tapping metal in the dark. Tick, click, pause, tap, tap, pause, a machine learning to lie and a man listening carefully enough to teach it. Years later, in a technical paper published by the Naval Underwater Systems Center in 1961, an engineer named Howard Eckstein described acoustic deception techniques used during the Second World War. The paper, titled Structure-Borne Sound as a Countermeasure, Submarine Applications, references an incident in April of 1943 involving a Gato-class submarine and a false signature generated through mechanical replication of ambient machinery noise. The paper does not name the submarine. It does not name the operator. It notes only that the technique was effective and that it was never repeated, likely because the conditions required a failing component with a distinctive rhythm, a sonar operator with enough experience to recognize it, and a captain willing to authorize improvisation under fire were too specific to standardize. The bearing, Eckstein writes, was the essential element. Without it, there would have been no rhythm to replicate, no pattern to deceive with. The flaw became the tool. The breakdown became the strategy. In that moment, failure and survival were the same sound. It is night now, years beyond the war, and the ocean remains. Somewhere beneath the surface, submarines still move in silence, listening. The technology has changed. The sonar is digital. The propulsion is nuclear. But the principle endures. Sound is survival, and silence is measured in seconds. The rhythm of a bearing, the tap of a wrench, the choice to make noise when doctrine demands none, these are the geometries of conscience translated into physics. The sonar operator from Pennsylvania lived to be 78. He worked as a machinist after the war, retired in Delaware, never served on a submarine again. His service record is preserved in the National Personnel Record Center in St. Louis. It lists his rank, his qualifications, his patrols. It does not mention the bearing. It does not mention the wrench. But the sound remains. Tick, click, pause, tap, tap, pause. A rhythm that meant nothing until it meant everything, echoing forward through time like sonar through water, faint but unmistakable, proof that survival sometimes sounds like something breaking, and mercy sometimes sounds like a lie, told carefully enough to be believed. In the forward torpedo room of a submarine, no longer in service, the bulkhead still bears the marks where metal met metal. Small dents, barely visible, clustered near the freshwater pipe. No one remembers how they got there. No one thought to ask. The marks remain because steel remembers what orders forget. And somewhere, in the dark, the ocean carries the memory of a machine that broke in exactly the right way, at exactly the right time, heard by exactly the right man. The sound fades, the pressure equalizes, the light thins, the water rises and settles and forgets nothing.